I am an audiologist who works at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Speech, Language, Hearing Sciences. So I'll be chatting with you today about the things that you can do to make sure that your hearing is as good as it can be for as long as possible. So the topics that I'll cover this morning are how loud are typical sounds on a farm? And I think some of the numbers that you'll see are actually a little bit astonishing. And then I'll be chatting about how loud sounds may damage your hearing, what you can do to protect your hearing, when it's time to have your hearing tested, and a bit of information about the Occupational Safety and Health Administration standard for hearing conservation and how that relates to agricultural employees. So first, taking a look at these two figures, on the left, you're seeing various sounds that are commonly take place on a farm. And then on the bottom of the figure, you see a scale in decibels. So decibels is the unit that we use to measure the loudness of sound. And you notice that there is a vertical line at 85 decibels. So we generally consider 85 decibels to be the maximum point at which we could listen to a sound for 8 hours a day and not be overly concerned about that sound damaging our hearing. So any sound that is above 85 decibels could potentially harm our hearing if we're listening to it for long periods of time. And so if you take a look at some of these various activities that you might engage in on a farm, you can see that, for example, driving a tractor that doesn't have a cab would exceed that 85 decibel mark. One that's also commonly understood by agricultural workers is that animals themselves are very loud. So you see that squealing pigs actually is even louder than driving a tractor. So what we try to do is to focus on how loud can we, how much sound can we tolerate for what period of time? And that's what you're seeing on the right-hand side. So you'll notice that for every 3 decibel increase in the loudness of sound, it's recommended that we cut our exposure time in half. So if we can be exposed to an 85 decibel sound for an 8-hour workday, any sound that gets louder than that, we need to reduce our exposure time. And this is without hearing protection. So with hearing protection, thankfully, we're able to increase the amount of time that we're exposed to loud sounds. So a little bit about the anatomy of the ear. In order to be able to hear, we need to have sound coming into our ear canal, vibrating the eardrum. Behind the eardrum, we have 3 tiny bones that are attached to the eardrum, and those bones then push on the fluid that's in that snail-shaped cochlea, which is our inner ear. And inside our inner ear, we have thousands and thousands of cells that process sound, so send information to our nerve that can bring that information to the brain for processing. So when we have noise exposure, it's those cells inside the ear called hair cells that become damaged. And so on the left here, you see normal hair cells inside our inner ear that are all lined up in rows, and they have these hair-like projections that become deflected when the fluid in our ear is moved by those bones in our ear. On the right, you see damage to those hair cells. So those hair-like projections that emerge from the cell have been destroyed by damage due to noise. Once those cells are gone, we don't have the ability to replace those cells as mammals. So interestingly, birds are capable of regenerating the cells in their inner ear, but mammals cannot. So for humans, once those cells are destroyed, they won't ever regrow. So our options then are to try to find ways to reduce our noise exposure to protect our hearing long term. So here you're seeing 3 strategies. We can walk away, meaning that we can reduce our exposure to noise simply by taking breaks or by moving away from somebody else who is using loud equipment if we could do our work elsewhere. Second strategy is turn it down. So here you're seeing an image of turning down music, but we can think of turning it down in other ways as well. So for example, we can purchase quieter equipment from the get-go, or we can put barriers around equipment that is particularly noisy to reduce our noise exposure. We can also make sure our equipment is running smoothly because it's much more likely to be overly loud if there's a piece that's running rough. And then our third strategy is to protect our hearing through hearing protection devices. So here we've got some images showing the variety of devices that are on the market, and they vary in terms of cost and in terms of convenience and in terms of effectiveness. So when we're choosing a hearing protection device, we want to take into account those three factors. So for example, earplugs that are foam earplugs are the least expensive and they are very effective, but they're not always incredibly convenient because we have to really be dutiful about how we insert them in our ears in order for them to do their job. Also, if we have dirty fingers, which we might if we're working outside, they can be a less advantageous option because then we're getting dirt on the earplug before we're putting it in our ear. So there are also ear muffs, which are a more convenient option. They, take a fraction of a second to put over your ears. So in terms of convenience, that's great. They tend to be more expensive, however, and they also tend to be hot for some people, especially in the summer months. So it's a matter of figuring out which type of hearing protection device is the one you'd actually be inclined to wear when you balance out those factors of effectiveness, convenience, and cost. And before we leave this slide, I'll mention that there's a section called new types. So you see there are flat earplugs that have an equal reduction of sound across all pitches. So those are really good options for musicians or people who enjoy going to concerts. We also have communication options for earplugs and earmuffs that allow you to be able to still hear the sounds you need to hear. So for example, some earmuffs actually are Bluetooth enabled to allow you to not only block out outside noise, but still be able to communicate even on the cell phone via a Bluetooth connection. So when you are inserting foam earplugs, insertion is key to their effectiveness. So the foam earplug needs to be rolled down as tightly as possible, and you need to be able to pull up on your ear with one hand while you insert the earplug with the other hand. So by creating proper insertion, this really allows you to know that you have effective reduction in sound. And to know how much reduction you would be able to obtain with a particular type of hearing protection, you can take a look at the noise reduction rating that's advertised with the hearing protection. If a hearing protection option does not offer you a noise reduction rating, then you know it's not actually hearing protection. And so one way that you can encourage everyone in your environment to wear hearing protection is to post signs that would inspire everyone to recognize when hearing protection would be a wise choice. Some signs of hearing loss, so some signs that you may have had some damage to those cells in your inner ear. If other people seem like they are mumbling, it may be that you are missing out on some of the sounds of speech. And so you'd also be aware that some of those sounds are missing if you're having a hard time specifically picking up on high-pitched sounds like birds or alarms. If you notice that you have more difficulty conversing when there's noise in the background, such as at a restaurant or party, that's another early sign of hearing difficulty. And also, if you have ringing in your ears that is chronic and is not there for just a moment or two, but is ongoing. So it's a good idea to contact an audiologist to have a hearing test every couple of years, just to monitor your hearing over time. I think some people are worried about having a hearing evaluation because they're worried that they might not like the news they receive. And they're also worried that there might be some pressure to do something about their hearing, so obtain hearing aids, for example. And my advice is it's just good to be informed and to know where your hearing stands today, so that you can try to keep it at that spot going forward. You might be more inclined to utilize hearing protection options if you know that your hearing is still quite good and you know that you have a lot of hearing left to protect. And lastly, I'd like to mention that the OSHA standard for occupational noise exposure protects workers from noise exposure in a number of ways. So number one is that it inspires employers to document the kinds of noise that their employees are exposed to that might exceed 85 decibels in that average 8-hour workday. It also promotes having a baseline hearing test within the first 6 months that an employee is working in a noisy environment, followed by annual testing to look for shifts in hearing over time. And an employer who offers an OSHA hearing conservation program will also then be providing a range of hearing protection options to their employees, as well as annual training about hearing conservation. So smaller farms that have fewer than 10 employees may be exempt from these federal standards from OSHA, but state citations could occur. So it is important if you are working on a larger farm or you're employed on a larger farm to discuss with your employer these hearing protection standards from OSHA. Thank you.
That was a great talk, Sarah. Thanks. I think it's super relevant for agriculture, definitely for all the reasons you mentioned. There are a number of exposures that folks probably have several every single day. So it looks like we've got one question and one comment. So first, the comment. So I got custom fitted earplugs when my son was in shooting sports. So easy and comfortable.
Oh, what a great comment. I appreciate that person for chiming in with that. So especially for shooting, if you recall that figure that I showed that showed the various noise levels of sounds, gunshots are really the loudest thing that we can be exposed to. And so even just one gunshot is enough that it could permanently affect a person's hearing over time. So custom earplugs are a great option for maximizing comfort and for maximizing protection.
Yeah, it seems like a great option if you make something comfortable and custom fit that you might be more likely to use it on a consistent basis.
Absolutely.
And then another question is, a lot of youth, but sort of everybody are using, headphones more and more. Do those provide any kind of protection? Does it depend? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Be happy to. So just noise canceling earphones, whether they're the style that goes in the ear or the style that goes over the ear, are not meant for actual hearing protection. They're meant more to improve sound quality, but they don't offer protection from noise damage. And so in order to have something that's really protective, we need to see a noise reduction rating on that product. One of our biggest concerns is that there's an inclination to listen to music, for example, while mowing the lawn. And so a person might even put an earbud in their ear and then perhaps even put an over-the-ear muff over those earbuds. So anything that breaks the seal underneath the ear muff could harm the effectiveness of that ear muff. So even including sunglasses or safety glasses. So we want to make sure that we are encouraging people to use products that truly are meant for protection. And most earbuds and over-the-ear headphones are not meant for hearing protection.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation and response to that question. If people are, considering buying new earphones or they're looking for hearing protection, is there any place that you want to be sure to give a shout out and send people to before we have our next talk?
So thankfully, there are many options for where hearing protection devices can be purchased. So whether it is a hardware store or a farm supply store, those are good options. Also online, of course, there are many options. If you go to any online merchant, you can see dozens and dozens of manufacturers of hearing protection devices that have a noise reduction rating.
That's perfect. And if anyone has any lingering questions or wants to reach out to Sarah and her group, they have a booth with the UMass Expo, and that is down in the chat. So I'd recommend that people check that out. Thanks for being with us